Hi, everybody. So good to see you. I'm so glad we have some of you here today on this nor'easter. I know it kept some people away, but it's cozy in here. Thanks for coming. I'm really happy to welcome Judge Johnston here from the Juvenile Court, and he brought some colleagues of his, and he's going to give you an inside look. Thank you.
Thank you. I need a microphone. My voice drops during the day. So, my name is Judge Joe Johnston, and I am the first justice in Norfolk County Juvenile Court. And I'm really pleased to be here and sort of tell you a little bit about what we do, tell you about our court. And I brought some ringers with me here because without them, I couldn't do this. So just a little idea, a little summary maybe of what we're trying to do. So the court that we work in, the juvenile court, it's privileged. It's a confidential proceeding. So you couldn't just show up at one of our courts and walk in and see, geez, what are you doing? What's this case about? So for reasons, I think for a lot of good reasons, they're closed to the public. So this gives us an opportunity to sort of tell folks about the work that we do, the important work we do. So our goal is to sort of tell you a little bit about our court, why we think it's the most important court on the planet because of the work that we do. With me to my left is Lakeisha Parker Small. Lakeisha is an assistant clerk in our court, but she also has a lot of background in doing other things, and I think she'll tell you a little bit about that. Before she worked at our court, being a private attorney, working as a DCF lawyer, and then also as a prosecutor. And to Lakeisha's left is Dr. Persing from our court clinic, and she'll tell you a little bit about the work that she does with the court clinic. The cases that we have are so challenging, and we refer cases her way. And then to her left is Kate McDonough, probation officer Kate McDonough, who is actually responsible for the town of Walpole. So any youth involving cases out of this community, Kate's involved, and she deals a lot with the Walpole Police Department, the Walpole schools, and so if you have any complaints about anything in Walpole, Kate's your go-to person. So in terms of the trial court itself, I'm just going to tell you that we are one of 7 trial court departments. So we have a district court, which is in many respects like a community court. We have the Boston Municipal Court, very very like the district courts. We have the housing court. A lot of times, evictions and things of that sort, landlord-tenant issues, they'll go to the housing court. There's a land court. So the land court is a lot of boundary stuff. Who owns what property. We have the probate and family court. The probate and family court, a lot of divorce and custody cases are heard there. And then we have the Superior Court. Superior Court is, has both civil cases and criminal cases. The criminal cases are serious felonies. So people charged with serious offenses will go to the criminal court in the Superior Court. But they also have civil actions. So if there was a motor vehicle accident outside and someone was hurt badly, it's a case that they would bring to the Superior Court. It was a medical malpractice case. That's a case that they'd bring to the Superior Court. And then we have the Juvenile Court. And that's why we're here, to tell you about the Juvenile Court. It's the most important court on the planet because the work that we do in our court really impacts the lives of families and youth for generations. We have so many different kind of case types. So we're going to tell you a little bit about our court, the work we do, and why we think it's the most important court. So we represent Norfolk County Juvenile Court. We are one of 11 county courts. So there are 11 county juvenile courts across Massachusetts. We have 43 judges in the juvenile court. In Norfolk County, we have 27 cities and towns, so including Walpole. So we go from Dedham, we go all the way down to Rhode Island border towns such as Franklin, Plainville. We go down to Cohasset. It's a pretty big area. We sit, when I say we sit, the judges sit in 3 courts in Norfolk County. We sit in the Dedham Juvenile Court. We sit in the Quincy District Court, and we have a session in the Stoughton Court. So this morning I came from Dedham, as did Kate McDonough and Dr. Persing, and Lakeisha happened to be working in the Stoughton session. So that's sort of an overview of sort of the logistics of the court. So what I thought we'd do is I'm going to introduce each one of our speakers, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about their work that they do. And then after that, I'm going to probably get a little bit into some of the work that I do. Talk a little bit about the cases, maybe give you some examples of some of the work that we do. And then I think we'd like to spend some time for some questions. And any questions that you folks might have, we'll try to do the best we can to answer them. So our first presenter is Lakeisha Parker Small. As I said, she's an assistant clerk in our court. And it's so great to work with her in the session because I have no clue what I'm doing, but she does. And she's able to help us. She knows her cases inside and out, knows why a case is before the court, and it's just, she makes our job, when I say our job, the judge's job, and actually anyone that works in our court, so much easier. So I welcome Lakeisha to come forward and spoke to you folks for a little bit.
Good afternoon, everybody. Put that down, slightly shorter than Judge Johnston. I brought notes in case I forget who I am, so. My name's Lakeisha Parker Small. I am currently an assistant clerk magistrate at the Norfolk Juvenile Court, as Judge Johnston said. To tell you a little bit about myself, before we get up to what it is I actually do now, I am originally from Kansas City. I came to Boston for law school, and I got stuck. Happens. But I live here. I live on the South Shore now. I started out my legal career as a prosecutor with the Suffolk County DA's office. I was there for a few years doing both adult and juvenile cases. So I was able to prosecute cases in the district courts, in the juvenile courts, and also indict cases and prosecute cases in the Superior Court. After I left the DA's office, I went to DCF, the Department of Children and Families, where I worked for about 10 years as a DCF attorney. I know I look very young, so it's hard to believe that. But yes, I was there for 10 years. And at DCF, the bulk of the cases that we do or did are called care and protection cases. And those are the cases that involve the care and custody of children who have been removed from families for abuse or neglect reasons, and kind of dealing with families that are involved with the department that are at risk of being cases that become care and protection cases. In my time at the Department of Children and Families, I litigated a lot of cases. We handle the cases from the beginning to the very end. So from the beginning stages when our social workers are working with families and there is the possibility of removal, we start to do legal conferencing. And if a removal happens, then that's when we go into court. We handle all the custody hearings, all the court proceedings, all the way up until either the child goes home, which is always the goal, or until the child goes somewhere else, whether it be a guardianship or an adoption. And we would handle all the guardianship and adoption issues as well. I'm sure you guys will have questions about that. We'll do that later, though. And then after I left the Department of Children and Families, I went into private practice for a couple of years. I did a short stint of work in housing court doing landlord-tenant stuff, not my cup of tea. So then I was back into everybody's personal business and did some divorce work in the probate court. Did a lot of custody cases, divorces, sort of the same cases involving like family dynamics in the probate court for a couple of years, and then now I am an assistant clerk magistrate. So my role at the court now is to work for the clerk's office, which is not. When you hear the word clerk, a lot of people think, oh, you are the judge's assistant and you do all of his work for him, but it doesn't really work like that. We're sort of a separate office from the judge's lobby, and we do the administrative duties of the courthouse. So there are some magisterial duties too, which are overlapping sometimes with what the judge does. He has the ability to set bails and make rulings and things like that. Clerk magistrates can set bails, and we can make probable cause determinations. We do probable cause hearings. We issue complaints and warrants and all those kinds of things. And we basically, everything that gets filed or that comes into the courthouse paper-wise has to come through us. And so we have to say, yes, this is right, or no, this is wrong, fix it, and then refile it. So it's our job to make sure that everything is perfect before it gets to Judge Johnston, so he doesn't scream at us, because you can tell he's a screamer. But we also run the courtroom sessions and maintain the dockets and make sure that we maintain things like exhibits and all the filings and everything, so that the record's complete in case anything ever gets appealed. Judge Johnston never gets appealed because he's always right. But everything that like I said, every piece of paper, everything that happens in that courthouse basically has to come through us, unless it's probation. That's something totally different sometimes. So the judge did kind of touch on some of the issues that come into our courthouse, but there are a lot of different cases. We have delinquencies, which are the criminal cases for kids. There's care and protection cases, which I talked about before, which are the custody cases. There are CRA cases, which probation handles for the most part, so I'm not going to get into those. And then we have adoptions, guardianships, paternity issues, harassment orders, appeals, expungements. There's all anything that could happen on a court case happens in the juvenile court as well. And I think one of the things that Judge Johnston did say that I think all of us believe is that the juvenile court is one of the most important courts, if not the most important court on the planet, because these are kids. These are our kids and our families and our communities. So we have a lot of ability to impact and make an impact before these kids become adults and actually picking up criminal cases or go to jail. Or we have the ability to help on the care and protection cases to, reunify families and make sure that they have the services and the things in place that they need to, strengthen families, which strengthens communities. So we have a pretty different reach than like a district court or a superior court. And that's really what makes us the most important court on the planet. So I will let our next presenter go, and then we'll answer your questions.
Thank you, Lakeisha. So I'm going to ask Dr. Persing to come up in just one second. So as I was mentioning, we have a lot of departments in our court, and one of the important court departments that we rely on, like so much, is our court clinic. And in a few minutes, we're going to get a little bit into some of the cases that we have and some of the challenges. But when we have these impossible cases, we're trying to figure something out with a youth that's struggling with, before the court, or a family that might be struggling, or a parent trying to figure out what's going on, and no one knows the answer. We call on Dr. Persing, or one of her colleagues in the court clinic, and the instructions are really simple. Figure this out, tell us what to do, and get it done now, right? Isn't that what happens? So in fact, this morning I had to bring her into the courtroom and said, we have a challenging case here and we need your help. So I welcome Dr. Persing to tell you a little bit about her work.
I am also not as tall as Judge Johnston, so let me adjust this. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Persing, and I'm a psychologist in the Norfolk County Juvenile Court. And you've heard that we're the most important court, but did you know we're also the best county in Massachusetts? So just want to put that out there. So before I was a psychologist, I had a number of different roles, and I never really thought that I would work in a court context. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that. It's a really meaningful job. It's also a very challenging job. So I was born and raised in New York. I still see a Boston Red Sox hat. We can all agree that the Yankees stink. We were Mets fans. And when I, went off to college, I really wanted to be a physical therapist. I really didn't have psychology in my mind at all. After not doing so well in my first semester, I realized, I don't think these hard sciences are for me. And so ended up learning more about the humanities and eventually finding psychology. I was a preschool teacher, and then I went to graduate school and worked in a lot of different settings. So I worked in hospitals and community mental health context as well. And it was through my community at the time that I began to learn more about the juvenile court. So I got to meet a juvenile court judge who I developed a relationship with, and then heard more about the important work that they were doing over there. And then also developed relationships with lawyers who on their free time were taking appeals cases for folks who are facing the death penalty. And I realized, wow, I have these really great skills and this interest in helping other people, and let's see how I can put this to good use in the legal system. So found my way to Massachusetts and found my way to the juvenile court. In addition to working in the juvenile court, I also do adult cases in private practice, and so have some contact with the probate and family court and the district and superior court as well. All right, so I'll take you to the juvenile court. So we sit in the courthouse. We're right across the lobby from the courtroom, and we do evaluations related to the kinds of cases that come into the court. So delinquency cases, like Lakeisha had mentioned, youthful offender, child requiring assistance, and care and protection cases. So in the court clinic, we evaluate people from age 0, essentially, all the way through adulthood. So often we get referral questions like Judge Johnston shared, what is going on? Please help us figure this out. So we conduct thorough evaluations and gather information from multiple sources. So caregivers, children, schools, mental health providers, medical providers, and put all of that information together in a report. And we share what we think is going on with a young person and what we would recommend, what we think could really help them. And then usually I find that you use our reports to make really difficult decisions, but ideally to help children and families that are really oriented toward, safety and well-being for all. So we do evaluations that are more extended, that can typically take weeks or months, and we joke that often we ask the judge for more time. We want to be as helpful as we can, as quickly as we can, but it takes a long time to get some of the information together. We also do same-day evaluations. So sometimes folks come in with pretty significant mental health or substance use concerns, and there's a question of whether or not they're safe today. And so the judge will call in the court clinic and we'll do an evaluation with multiple sources of data, but in the same day. So sometimes we only have, a few hours to do an evaluation and to share an opinion with the judge if we think that someone needs a higher level of care, or we use the language of involuntary commitment for mental health or substance use reasons. So those are kind of the main aspects of the work that we do. So extended evaluations as well as emergency same-day evaluations. And then we also just have other roles that we take on in court. So sometimes the judge might ask us to provide education to families about what we do in the court clinic. Sometimes we help probation officers, like just today. Kate had some questions about a case and possible placements, and so we were able to brainstorm to think about what could help a young person who's been having some difficulties. We also partner with attorneys and other professionals to do trainings and provide resources to other folks who are involved with the court. And it's really a wonderful job. It's a wonderful setting. As I mentioned, it can be very, challenging. I remind myself that when people come to juvenile court, it's often not for good reasons, right? Like people usually come, it's a low point in some ways of their life, and we try to find a lot of empathy and validation and find ways to help make things a little bit better for them in the ways that we can. So that's the court clinic. All right, and I'm sure you'll have questions, and we'll get to them in a little bit. You're welcome. Thank you.
So you're gonna hear next from probation officer Kate McDonough, one of the probation officers in our court, and she wears her job on her sleeves. because she is so enthusiastic, enjoys what she's doing. Her goal is always, always to help a kid that might be having some tough times, help a family that's having tough times, pointing the right way. It's often entertaining to watch her in the courtroom because I get a lot of this and I get a lot of that, but she's putting her heart and soul into every case that she has. And it's truly a privilege to work with Kate. So Kate, we'll invite you forward.
Okay, so I'm Kate McDonough. I have been in probation since 2004, and I, like Dr. Persing, did not see myself in the courts, but here I am. I just knew I was the fun aunt, and I was always the one to watch kids, so I knew that I was going to do something to help kids. That was really my ultimate goal. I've been a probation officer since 2015, and what my role is, I'm the probation officer that monitors conditions, right? What I tell the kids when I speak to the kids is I call myself a professional tattletale, right? Because when I have kids come into the court, if they're not doing what they need to do, I go right to this guy in the robe, and tell him, you know, I was the youngest. I had 3 older brothers, so I was groomed for this role to be a tattletale because that's what I did growing up. So I fit nicely into this role. Delinquencies, we have kids coming in anywhere from shoplifting cases to vehicular homicides. You know, we have a variety of kids that we see, and someone up here mentioned it. You know, it's not a fabulous place to be at times. It's really dark and really sad. So, you know, see, this is where I get, you know, my heart on my sleeve, my goal is to help every kid that comes through my door. I know when I can't do that, that weighs on me. But that's the job that I chose to do. That's really my goal. So when I have a kid that's struggling and I really can't help them, I don't like that very much. And so kind of those what the heck questions is, you know, we rely heavily on the court clinic. And as Dr. Persing said, I already was in her office this morning talking to her about a little 12-year-old boy that's really struggling, right? Because I don't have those initials after my name. I need help. I'm not qualified to make those decisions. Our goal really is to give resources to these kids and make them a little bit better when they leave our court. Our other, the delinquency cases, the other cases that we have, they referenced it, the CRA, it's called the Child Requiring Assistance. And we have 4 different categories. We have a stubborn petition, which is a parent can come to the court if they're having trouble with their child, you know, is getting into trouble, maybe doing some things that they really shouldn't be, staying out all night. We have truancy petitions, and the school usually files those. Those are the kiddos that are struggling to attend school. And we've really seen an increase in that after the pandemic. A lot of kiddos struggling with that. We have a habitual school offender where kiddos are struggling in school and they're getting in trouble in school. And we also, the last one, which we don't see very often, is a sexually exploited child, kids that are being trafficked. Yes, it's a very real thing. Again, we don't have them in our court, but it does exist. Our goal when the delinquency cases come into our court and I'm assigned to supervise a case, our goal is to have that person remain in the community as opposed to being held in DYS juvenile jail. And in order to stay in the community, they have to abide by all the conditions that Judge Johnston sets forth. And when they don't do that, that's where my tattletaling role comes in, and I have to advance the case and tell Judge Johnston that this kid is not doing what they need to do. I'm very lucky and very blessed to have this job, but it is very difficult. It's a difficult job, but I wouldn't change it. I do have, most of my success stories are around substance abuse, which is fabulous because I do get text every once in a while from the parents just saying, hey, you know, Joe's still sober. You made a great impact on his life. And those are the things that I really like to do. you know, I like to print out those things and I show them to my higher ups, you know? That's the stuff that I'm proud of. That's what I want. I tell everyone, I tell all my clients, please come back here when you're off probation. Tell me how you're doing. I want to know. You know, some of them forget, but it's those texts and those things after, especially if I'm having a difficult day, or, I really didn't get through to Sarah, who came into my office today. She just didn't want to listen to me, and I get that text. That makes me feel really good. It's why I got into this job in the first place, and so that's a win for me. But it is, like you said, we see some of the people on the darkest day. So if I can make anything just a little bit better for them when they leave me, I did something right. Right? Thank you.
So I wasn't lying when I said Kate gives us one of these. So just a little bit of my background. I grew up. I'm from Boston, West Roxbury, and unlike these ringers that we brought here, I wasn't a good student. I barely got out of high school. I was running from the police left and right. We had some, we had some problems in my home. We were homeless for periods, and so it was a difficult journey for us growing up. And then later in life, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but later in life, this light in my brain slowly started to turn on. And when I was in, right out of high school, my first job was bagging groceries at a grocery store. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, And things like that help, I think, grow, mature. And I was fortunate enough to get into college. And I remember in my third year in college, looking a little bit into probation. I was fortunate enough to get an internship at a local juvenile court nearby my school. And that's what really exposed me to the juvenile court. And then after that, after college, I was fortunate enough to work in a program working with a lot of city kids involved with the court. And I was pretty close in age to many of them, and I felt I could relate to a lot of the kids having gone through some of the things that they had gone through. And I decided, that I wanted to work in probation, and I was fortunate enough to get a job in the probation department in Dorchester District Court, which is a pretty busy court. And I was watching these lawyers in action all the time, and, I'm thinking, geez, that'd be pretty good, right, to try to be a lawyer. So I was fortunate enough, and I wasn't one for studying, and I never studied for anything in my life. But there's this exam that you have to study for to get into law school. It's called the LSAT. And I never studied like I had never studied before, and I worked my tail off. And somehow I got a decent grade, and it just shows you if you put the work into it, you can accomplish some things. And I was fortunate enough to get into law school. And for me, the good combination was going to law school in the evenings. I didn't have 2 nickels to my name, so I had to work, during the day, and went to school at night. But I had that combination of working in the court, attending school at night, and it was a great combination. And after law school, I went into practice, and the first place I worked was in the juvenile court. And I've never left. I just continued to work in there. I always had my foot in the door in the juvenile court. And I used to watch these judges, and I'm like, geez, that would be pretty cool, right, to try to be a judge. And so after doing this for 15 years, I don't know how it happened, but I was fortunate enough to be nominated. I put in an application, and some folks went to bat for me, and I was fortunate enough to get a job as a juvenile court judge. And this past October, I just started my 24th year as a judge. And I'm, I feel like I have another 20 years in me. I really do. But they have this mandatory retirement age. It's going to be coming up for me in a few years. But I honestly can tell you that I pinch myself every day going to work. I'm so proud to work with these pros because they make our job so much easier. But the job is challenging, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the work that we do. So we have, in our world, we call them delinquency cases, and many of you refer to them as criminal cases. And Kate mentioned anything from shoplifting to firearm cases to vehicular homicide cases. And I just, not to bore you with some numbers, but in 2024, we've had, across the Commonwealth, we had over 6,600 delinquency complaints filed in our courts. I mean, that's just one case type across the board. In Norfolk County, in the past few years, the past 3 years, we've had 4 vehicular homicide cases where youth driving a vehicle, and none of these cases involved alcohol or drugs, but they just made the wrong turn at the wrong time, and something bad happened, and someone was killed. And so we do a lot of outreach. We go to the schools. Last week we were at 3 different schools. We do it during our lunch hour, right? These guys are giving up their lunch to come out and talk to folks like you and to the students at the different schools and try to, there's this, the reputation of the court is like it's a bad place to be, and it can be, right? And as a former client, I can tell you it's not a great place to be. But we try to tell them, we have these career day things, and we try to explain to them, that this can be a great place. We can do some good things here, and we need people like you to come work for our court, and hopefully incite with them some enthusiasm. I made a copy of today's list and tomorrow's list, just to give you an idea what we're dealing with, with cases. I've had 2 cases involving indecent assault and battery. I have 1 case involving sexual contact with an animal. I have a charge of larceny over $1,200. I have another sexual assault charge, assault and battery on a police officer, assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon, rape of a child with force. I mean, those are just some examples of what we had on this morning's list. Tomorrow, we're looking forward to destruction of property, shoplifting, assault and battery on a household member, threats to commit a crime, attempts to commit a crime, unarmed robbery, larceny from a person. Just a sort of a snapshot of what we have on tomorrow's list. So it's not a kiddie court, and some of the stuff that we see is pretty difficult to address. But many of our cases, we can divert them. The first time offender before the court, what can we do? Can we save their record? Can we preserve their record? And that's the goal that we have. The next level of cases, the more serious cases, are what we call youthful offender cases. Those are cases if a youth is 14 or older, they can be indicted as a youthful offender. And Lakeisha made reference to when she was prosecuting in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, those are kind of the cases that she saw. So those are cases when a youth is charged with a violent crime, often involving a firearm, often a sexual assault. And if they're indicted as a youthful offender, the stakes are high. So in addition to, the judge has options on sentencing, which include, a juvenile type of sentence, but it can also include an adult sentence. So a youth could be actually sentenced to an adult jail or adult prison. So just to give you an example of a case that I had, this involved 2 gangs going at each other, and they just, one's shooting one day, the other's shooting back the other day. And one day there was a group of kids at the top of a street in Dorchester, and 2 kids came up on a bike. They parked their bike to the side, took out a firearm, shot up the street at the other boys at the top of the hill. Coincidentally, there was a woman visiting her mother, waiting for her mom to come down from the stairs to go shopping. She got shot. She got shot in the eye. She went down. Police were right on the scene. They were able to arrest one of the youth. That youth was indicted as what we call a youthful offender. And it went before a jury of 12. And at the end, the jury found that this youth committed this offense, and he was adjudicated as what we call a youthful offender. And so we have what we call a pre-sentence investigation. So someone like Kate McDonough will go out and get as much information as we can about the youth's family, his background, his school, his any medical issues, any psychiatric issues. Sometimes we bring in the court clinic to assist us if there's something with what we call aid in sentencing. And that youth, unfortunately, given the serious nature of the youth, of the charge that youth was facing, he was sentenced. He was given an adult sentence. So there's often a perception that the juvenile court is a kiddie court. It's not. I mean, when you're dealing with cases like that, it just kind of resonates with you that this is serious. And when you look at the responsibilities as a judge, that, if this young person is adjudicated, wow, there's a lot of responsibility on us. The responsibility of sentencing someone, the appropriate sentencing, somehow balancing what's, thinking of rehabilitation, but also protecting the community. So that's just one area. Kate mentioned what we call CRAs, Child Requiring Assistance. It could be a school. Kate was mentioning that this morning the probation officer on duty took 3 filings from the town of Walpole of families that they had a child that's struggling. It could be a child struggling with substance issues. It could be a child struggling with school. It could be a child being not coming home at night, being gone for days, and a family not having any idea where they are. And they'll come to someone like Kate McDonough, and they'll talk to Kate about what can we do, how can we help. It's not criminal. We're not locking these kids up. These kind of cases, we're trying to help. We're trying to help them, and they'll get Kate will, Kate will refer them. She, as mentioned earlier, she was in talking to Dr. Persing today about a 12-year-old kid. How can we help this kid out? How can we help this family out? So those are, another area of some of the challenging cases that we have. When we make decisions about what's the right thing to do, what's the right sentence, what's the right disposition, someone will show up to our court, and I've seen everybody. I've seen coaches, I've seen priests, I've seen rabbis, I've seen next door neighbors, I've seen employers come in and say, we want to help this kid. This is what we can do to help this young man. Sometimes the youth will share with me, will share with us what they've been going through. So I have a letter I'm just going to read to you, and I just ask for your patience while I go through this. But this is involving a young woman that's been through a lot and trying to explain maybe why she did what she did. So it's addressed to the court, and she says, I've asked a chance to tell you my story, which is what led me here today. Growing up, I was raised by 2 parents with substance use disorder. Some examples: watching my mother overdose at age 10, calling the police myself to report a domestic violence incident going on in our home, and constantly breaking in the bathroom door to find my mother acting like a zombie with a needle still hanging in her arm. Due to this difficult upbringing, I searched for things that made me feel loved, accepted, and overall happy. Unfortunately, when I tried alcohol for the first time, I fell in love. It replaced everything I wasn't receiving from my parents. Drinking changed me. I already believe my actions are a result of my drinking, and because of my drinking, I've stuffed down a lot of trauma and thoughts and feelings that come along. In 2016, my dad took his own life because of the demons that he's been suffering. Currently, my mom is in prison because of hers as well. I'm 17 years old with a long and positive life ahead of me if I make the changes I need to make now. I believe I need professional help with substance use disorder. And she did some research looking into programs. And with the help that I've learned from these two rehabilitation programs, I believe I can be successful. Their main focus is to help girls like me battle and conquer their addictions, as well as mental health. They offer therapy, psychiatry, a chance to work, or go to school. The programs also force us to attend AA meetings and a strong recovery community. Your Honor, this is the type of program I need to be in while I take responsibility for my actions. I am pleading for the chance to change my life before I fall victim to my own doing. I deserve better than where I have got myself today. And I am ready and willing to fight a new and positive life. And thank you for the opportunity to be heard. So when you hear this kid tell you her story, it answers some questions like, wow, how did she get where she is today, right? And you just, a lot of it is just a matter of luck. A lot of it is like I was born unlucky to my parents. One's in jail, one's committed suicide, and this poor kid reaching out for help and saying what I can do, recognizing at age 17 what she needs to do to change her life around. You've heard about the care and protection cases that we have. These are the cases where the Department of Children and Family comes to the court and they said and tell us these children are in need of care and protection because of something. Parents are struggling with substances. Parents are engaged in domestic violence that the children witness. Parent is in jail. Parent overdosed and died, leaving these kids with no parent. So these are the cases that we see, and we have to make some difficult decisions about where, what can we do to help this family out. our goal is to, for every, Lakeisha made reference to this earlier, is to, return these kids to their home. What were the issues that brought this family to our court? And what can be done so that these kids can return safely? So that the parents address the issues that brought our case to court. But if they can't do that, then something else has to happen. And we have to step in and figure out what else can happen. So I can't tell you how many grandparents that come to our court, that come in and say, look at, my daughter, my son's been suffering. We want to step up. We want to help out our grandchildren. And it wasn't in their job description, right? Thinking that they were going to step up and take over, being custodians for their kids. And just to give you a couple quick examples of cases, I remember early on when I first started, there was this young woman that was really struggling with drugs, and she had a child, and the department came in and they, on a call that she had overdosed, and leaving a 5-year-old son there with her. And so the department was given emergency custody. And then she went AWOL. This woman went AWOL. No one could find her. And then we review our cases. We try to find out what's going on with the parent. And we learned later that this woman was found in an abandoned building, and she had suffered another overdose, but she had been sitting in a position where she was sitting on her leg, crossed under her butt, and she had lost all circulation. And when she was rushed to Boston Medical Center, they had to amputate her leg. And so we're getting these reports, and then as the case progressed, we learned that she was discharged from Boston Medical Center and went into a rehabilitation for dealing with her drugs. And I'm getting these reports that she's really doing it. She's really working hard. And, it went on for a while. And we would get, we'd put the case on the list every 3 months and would find out how she was doing in her rehabilitation. And I remember about a year into the case, we had to make a decision. Had this mom made the progress that she needed to make? And I remember she had been in a treatment program from the western part of the state. She came to court with a couple of her counselors, and they just spoke so highly of how committed she was to her sobriety. And the department social workers talked about the progress that she made, trying to be a better parent, dealing with her demons, with her substance issues, but what she needed to do to be a better parent. And so on this day, this woman with one leg standing before the court got custody of her son back. Good day. Good day. 4 weeks ago, we had a case where we did an adoption for a little boy. It started off on March 1st, a few years ago. And this woman went to her friend's house and asked to use the bathroom, and she delivered a child. But her friend didn't know this, and she walked out of the house and put the baby under her jacket, under her coat. It was on March 1st. You can imagine how cold it was. And she put the baby in a trash barrel outside. And just by chance, someone was walking by and heard this little baby, all of this big crying. And that started everything. 911, response workers. And this little boy was in the hospital for 2 months. He actually had stopped breathing at one point. The mother had, unfortunately, some significant, mental health issues, and she was not able to get her child back. So we had to make plans about what are we going to do for this little boy. And the department, so I ended up having to make a difficult decision, terminating her parental rights. And her rights were terminated, and then we had to look at, okay, who's gonna be the parent for this child, right? This little kid doesn't have a parent. And the department did a search. They did what they call a family find, and they found this woman who was a second cousin to the mother. She was an immigrant from Haiti working for the United States Post Office in Florida, and said, I'll step up. Let me open my home, my heart, to take this little boy in. And she did. And so she became the foster parent for this child. And then it just kept going. It kept going well. So just a couple 3 months ago, we did an adoption where this little boy was adopted by the mom's second cousin. So now he's in a forever home, and it was so remarkable just seeing. I mean, you don't forget this stuff. I forget what I had for breakfast this morning, but stuff like this, you just don't forget, right? And so doing this adoption, I just remembered what it was like that morning, that day doing the adoption. I remember what it was like when we first took that case in. And now I'm looking at this little boy, who's progressed so much, not having the medical issues that everyone was scared to death, that things, bad things were going to happen for this little kid. And now he's in a forever home, a loving home, and he's got every opportunity. So those are good days at the office. Right, so a case like this that started off so badly, as unfortunate as terrible as it was, had a pretty good ending. So that's sort of a snapshot of the work that we do, and that's why we think and we say to you, there's no more important court on the planet, because the work we do really does impact the lives of kids and families for generations. I mean, if you think about, the mom that got her act together with the drugs, that she, with one leg, gets her kid back, right? Fought the fight with her drugs. The little boy that, all of 6 pounds in a trash barrel on March 1st on Dorchester Avenue, is now in a forever home. That's a good day at the office. So that we've given you a little glimpse of what we do, and I think you maybe have not heard about some of the cases that we do. So if someone asks you, like, what's the most important court on the planet? Here's what I expect: the juvenile court. Because the work that we do impacts the lives of kids and families for generations. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for listening to all of us. And if anyone wants to shout out any questions, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Yes.
I'll stand up so everyone can hear me, I hope. I was curious, well, I'd like you to comment on the age category. And you said 14 to 18 is considered different than birth to 14. And I know that there was something tossing around in the courts about extending the juvenile age so that more people or children over 18 but under 21, I guess, I don't know, but if I'm articulating correctly, if you know what I'm talking
I do. So right now we have jurisdiction of a youth that's alleged to commit offense up until their 18th birthday. Not too long ago, it was actually up to their 17th birthday. Then it was changed to that. If someone, I mentioned the youthful offender cases, so if that offense occurs prior to their 18th birthday, as I said, they can be sentenced as an adult, so we can have jurisdiction well into their adulthood. What you're talking about is what's raising the age, and there's a lot of, people are talking a lot about the research out there about brain development for kids and how slow it is for them to develop, and should they be responsible for some of these decisions. So there's legislation out there about increasing the age to different levels, and I think the most recent legislation is up to age 19. I'm not sure what the net result of that is going to be. It's been up there, more than 1 year for several years. So I guess wait and see what happens. It'll definitely affect us in terms of obviously dealing with more youth coming before the court, more resources that we need. What are the numbers going to look like? And I'm just not sure how it's going to play out.
If I could comment further, just that because they can vote when they're 18, they can get marijuana when they're 18, and
Go to war when they're 18.
is that, that sort of contradicts juvenile court? I don't know, tell me. I need to know.
No,
Can.
it's
It's a sticky wicket.
yeah, it's been out there. I'm not sure how many jurisdictions have increased. It's most have not. Most have not. There's also some talk about having a separate young adult court. So you'd have the juvenile court, you have the adult court, and somewhere in between you'd have this sort of young adult court. I don't I'm not sure it's going to go that route. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to 19 and wait and see what happens with the numbers. So,
Also, one more thing, just.
and just so we don't make the law on this, just.
I know. I'll be quiet after this, I promise. Is that, now I forgot. Something to do with, the incarceration. Could you speak of how frequent, and especially in regards to getting these children into mental health care facilities? Because I know of one hospital, I don't think it's in Norfolk County, but they had their emergency rooms loaded with children that had no place to go.
Do you want to talk about the mental health crisis with these kids?
Yeah, what you're speaking to is a concern that we share. You know, a lot of our youth do have mental health conditions, and sadly, since the pandemic, that has been much more of a crisis. I've seen language of an epidemic, and there's so much need and not enough resources. So I remember also reading articles about how youth were boarding in emergency rooms. You know, they have mental health needs, and they're just in the emergency room because there's no placement. And so, sadly, sometimes, we've seen that continue. And there are lots of conversations about placement. So one of the things that we do in the court clinic is try to work with the different systems, like the Department of Children and Families, school districts, attorneys, to try to find the appropriate placement that can meet the needs of youth with mental health challenges. And it's so challenging when there's not enough resources in the system. And so another important piece would be advocacy. I'm thinking of the importance involving the legislature to try to help us to get more money and more resources for the youth that we see here in Massachusetts, because there's a need.
My daughter adopted, well, at first he was a foster child. She got a call. She had an only daughter, an only child who was a girl. And when she started high school, she didn't want to be an only child. So Karen put in for adoption, and it never worked out until Julia was at Redwood. But they still, when she got the call, would she be a foster parent, she said yes. And it was a 14-year-old boy who was very tall, so he looks older than he is. And he was a foster child for a year. And then when he was 15, they went before the boy and Karen. And the judge said, I believe you're old enough to make your own decisions. And his mother had put him in a group home with no possibility of being adopted. She didn't want him to be adopted by anybody, but she wasn't going to take care of him. His father was dead. So the judge granted. He said, come back on the 30th of the month, and I will approve the adoption. And he's now 19, and there have been problems. She lived in Westwood, and he wanted her to move to Lancaster because that's where he grew up. Well, Judy was already in college, so it didn't really matter, so she moved to Lancaster. He wanted to go to school with his friends, and he dropped out of school. And but she said, this is his time in life when he can make bad decisions, and I'll take care of him. He's never broken the law or anything like that. And it's going on, it's ongoing, so just pray for them. But it's, I'm very proud of my daughter. It makes life easier, but she wanted to help somebody.
And it sounds like she's working on it.
One thing I will say is that we see a lot of family members, a lot of grandparents, a lot of second cousin for twice removed from nowhere that come in to take a lot of the kids that come into the system, as people call it. But there are so many people like your daughter who have no relationship to any of these kids that just show up, and they show up for so many kids. And we saw on National Adoption Day back in November, a lot of family members and a lot of completely random members of the community, or a teacher, or a social worker, or a friend of a friend, or just somebody who is like, you know what, I have a home and I can help somebody. And it's so important to have those people show up for the kids and for the community. So it's such a good thing.
My problem's got a little bit.
We like you.
Just kind of tell us, like, and I'm not saying, I know you have above average cases and you have some that go along smoothly. What would be an average timeline, start to finish, on something like, whatever, I mean, that's not predictable.
Yeah, so it's so much depends on the case type and what happens. So, you know, we gave an example of a shoplifting and first offense, no other trouble. You know, maybe we could divert this child. We could probably take care of this case in a couple, 3 months' time. Do this shoplifters program, or you know, whatever it might be. We could finish that, and then you know, the extreme might be on the delinquency side, or the youthful offender side, a serious offense. I rattled off a few cases today. There's a process with those, getting what we call discovery and things like those. Those can, excuse me, those can stretch out. They can, you know, sometimes take over a year. Excuse me. So much depends on the case type. The care and protection cases where these kids come in and abuse and neglect. I mean, we got to figure out where these kids are going to go, right? Can they go back home? And it's not like hitting a light switch where you can say, I will do this in 90 days, 60 days. It doesn't work that way. And so many, you know, every case is so different. There's not a simple formula. But we hoped on those cases we can resolve them to 12 to 18 months. But there's so many different variations. I don't know, Lakeisha, if you can weigh in.
Sure. So just to touch on the care and protection cases, a lot of it is so dependent on families. It's dependent on if you have a mother or a father that's motivated and they come in and say, I'm going to do everything I can do to get my child back. That child could be back home within months, depending on, you know, what's the reason that they came into care. Obviously, things like substance abuse, the court and the Department of Children and Families has to monitor that for a while before they can put a child back in a home where there's been a severe substance abuse issue. Or, you know, if there's physical abuse happening with the children, that's not a situation where anybody is going to jump the gun and say, oh, you know, they seem like they're doing okay. Let's just put this kid back into that situation. So each case is very dependent on the parents. It's very dependent on the child, and it's going to be dependent on who else is involved in that. What services are available, what services the parents are taking advantage of, and I think that's once again why the juvenile court's the most important court on the planet. We have to have the people, the resources, probation, social workers, all of the right moving parts have to be in place to get the cases to move, because we can't just go into court and be like, oh, it's been 4 months, go home. It doesn't work like that. So it really depends.
That's it, huh? Thank you all for coming.